Consciousness returned to him not as a breath, but as a slow, heavy pulse deep within the earth. He tried to open his eyes, but found only the sensation of sunlight warming 1,000 tiny leaves. Panic flared in his mind as he realized he could no longer feel his arms, his legs, or the rhythm of a beating heart. He had been a man once, yet the universe had seen fit to cast his soul into a useless, stationary plant. He attempted to scream, but the only response was the rustling of his own branches in the mountain breeze. A sudden sharp vibration near his bark drew his attention to a pair of oversized, buzzing intruders. These insects were the size of fists, their compound eyes gleaming with a mindless, predatory hunger. With a surge of instinctual rage, he willed his stiffest branch to lash out at the pests. The wood connected with a sickening crunch, sending the broken bodies of the insects tumbling into the dirt. In that instant, a cold, mechanical voice echoed through his mind, announcing a double kill. A luminous display appeared before his consciousness, listing his new name as Yuzu and his species as a mutated willow. The system informed him of something called evolution points, earned through the simple act of termination. He realized that by absorbing the essence of other living things, he could rewrite his own biological destiny. His stats were pitiful, with a longevity of a mere fraction of a year and only 50 brittle branches. However, the system offered a path, 0.1 points to strengthen a single branch, turning wood into a weapon. He hesitated, wondering if he should save his points or prepare for the unseen dangers of this wilderness. A low growl from the thicket nearby settled the debate instantly. Yuzu poured his evolution points into 3 of his branches, feeling a surge of heat rush through his wooden veins. To his amazement, these 3 limbs now obeyed his will as naturally as fingers on a hand. No longer a helpless victim, he turned his newfound strength toward a massive hornet nest hanging from a nearby oak. He needed more points, and this nest was a treasure trove of potential evolution. The upgraded branches struck like lightning, tearing the nest from its moorings and crushing the defenders within. System notifications flooded his mind as his evolution point counter began to climb steadily. Half a month passed in a blur of hunting and sunlight absorption, and Yuzu's form had changed drastically. Every one of his 50 branches was now a hardened, whip-like weapon, capable of lethal precision. He gathered his limbs into a tight spiral, testing a new technique he called the tornado pierce. Even without direct contact, the sheer air pressure from the move shattered a boulder 10 meters away. He felt like a god in this small corner of the world, a sentinel that none could challenge. His attention was diverted when a small, clumsy bird's nest tumbled from a higher cliff and landed among his branches. These were not ordinary birds, but the chicks of peregrine falcons, legendary predators of the sky. He realized that as a tree, he lacked mobility, but these creatures could be his eyes and claws in the distance. He began to hunt small game, dropping the meat into the nest to ensure the survival of his future servants. However, the world outside his clearing was far more dangerous than he had initially perceived. He caught glimpses of tempest wolves and a massive gorilla that could uproot entire groves with a single hand. If he wanted to survive, he needed to evolve his foundation, beginning with his very roots. The system warned that root evolution was 10 times more expensive, but Yuzu did not hesitate to pay the price. A scream that no human could hear tore through the canyon as his roots cracked and reformed into something stronger. When the pain subsided, a single massive red root lay coiled beneath him, possessing more power than all his branches combined. His recovery was cut short by the sound of a distant explosion and the scent of something foul on the wind. Something was coming, something that did not belong in this forest, and it was heading straight for his canyon. High above the canyon floor, the chirping of falcon chicks began to echo through the willow tree's branches. Yuzu recalled how the nest had fallen into his canopy while he was clearing away obstructive branches for sunlight. He identified these birds as peregrine falcons, a medium-sized and ferocious species known for their incredible dive speeds. Realizing he lacked aerial combat abilities, Yuzu decided to tame the chicks to serve as his eyes and scouts in the sky. This new world was teeming with mutated threats like tempest wolves and giant spiders that could end his life at any moment. To feed his new companions, Yuzu hunted a white rabbit and watched as the hungry chicks devoured the meal instantly. The system notified him that he had gained a whole evolution point from the successful hunt. With all 50 of his branches already strengthened, Yuzu turned his attention to his roots for the first time. He was shocked to find that upgrading a single root cost 10 times more than a branch, signifying their immense importance. As soon as he initiated the upgrade, an agonizing sensation ripped through his entire spiritual form. He compared the pain to being drilled by an electric tool, leaving him breathing heavily through his spiritual connection. However, The pain proved worth it when he realized he could now move one thick, red root freely beneath the surface. His hopes of traveling freely were dashed when he attempted to uplift himself and felt an even sharper pain. Resigned to his stationary life, he decided to use the red root as a hidden, lethal weapon to protect his trunk. Suddenly, a loud blast erupted nearby, forcing Yuzu to activate his combat mode immediately. He discovered an injured red fox lying on the ground, its wounds blackened by a lethal poison. At first, he viewed the creature as a source of points, but the system revealed his own branch fluids had medicinal properties. The fluid detoxified the fox, and despite losing a strengthened branch in the process, Yuzu watched the creature recover. When the fox began rubbing its head against his bark, Yuzu's intent to kill melted away in the face of its cuteness. To his amazement, the fox began to glow as the system announced it was undergoing its own mutation. The creature evolved into a mutated red fox with the special ability Charm Eyes and fur that resembled flickering fire. Yuzu checked his own stats and realized he was still 5 times stronger than the fox at beginner stage 9. The fox suddenly ran away, making him wonder if humans were nearby, as its wounds looked like they were caused by arrows. Not wanting to be hunted as a demon tree, Yuzu retracted his face and resolved to act like an ordinary plant. 2 young girls soon approached him, carrying offerings of fruit and water for their deceased father. Yuzu screamed internally upon realizing a human body was buried right beneath his root system. He watched the girls pray, wishing they would leave quickly so he could resume his cultivation in peace. When they went to a nearby river to bathe, Yuzu tried to change his position to see them, but was stopped by intense pain. He felt truly powerless, a prisoner of his own stationary form despite his growing spiritual power. A week passed, and his peregrine falcons reached beginner stage 3, proving themselves in a battle against a golden eagle. Yuzu intervened when the eagle attacked his fox, using his Tornado Pierce move to finish the beast himself. He decided to conceal his aura, realizing that his immense energy was what lured such dangerous predators to his canyon. He knew there were creatures out there far more powerful than him, and he could not afford to act recklessly anymore. Suddenly, a gargantuan shadow descended from the sky, destroying his roots and branches in a single strike. A gigantic Warax snake appeared, its tail shaped like a massive blade that could cut through anything. Yuzu yelled at his companions to hide as he countered the snake's tail with his thick red roots. He forcefully strengthened all 9 of his roots at once to hold the beast, causing his very core to begin cracking. The snake eventually retreated, leaving Yuzu battered and breathing heavily, feeling his own weakness. Just as he feared his end, a system window appeared, asking if he wished to evolve to the next rank. Something was coming, something that did not belong in this forest, and it was heading straight for his canyon. The peaceful atmosphere of the canyon is shattered as a massive, scaled shadow descends from the sky without warning. Sharp, blade-like scales scrape against the rocks as the gigantic Warax snake reveals its terrifying form. Yuzu watches in horror as his strengthened branches are sliced into splinters by the serpent's sudden lunge. The monster coils its massive body around a nearby tree, uprooting it with effortless, destructive power. Yuzu quickly summons his status window to analyze the enemy, realizing it is a stage 9 beast far stronger than anticipated. He shouts for Xiaohong and the falcon chicks to hide behind his trunk as the snake prepares another strike. The snake's tail slams into Yuzu's main trunk, sending a jarring shock through his entire consciousness. Gritting his spiritual teeth, Yuzu channels his remaining evolution points to strengthen all 9 of his primary roots simultaneously. Thick, red-armored roots burst from the soil like spears, seeking to impale the serpent's soft underbelly. The Warax snake hisses in agony as a root creates a small crack in its diamond-hard scales, but it refuses to retreat. The serpent unleashes its corrosive poison, blackening the leaves and causing the willow's branches to wither instantly. Yuzu releases a surge of killing intent, driving his roots forward in a relentless barrage that forces the snake to slink back into the shadows. With the enemy gone, Yuzu's form begins to crack under the strain of his own forced evolution. Suddenly, a system notification rings out, offering a breakthrough to the next rank for 10 evolution points. Without hesitation, Yuzu confirms the evolution, triggering a blinding pillar of light that engulfs the entire canyon. His body expands to twice its original size, and all his severed branches regrow with a shimmering, spiritual luster. The light spreads to his companions, and Xiaohong evolves further, her fur now resembling a living flame. Now a rank 1 entity, Yuzu senses a dense fog ability, awakening within his core. His senses sharpen, and he hears a distant scream for help echoing through the forest. Through the trees, the 2 human sisters appear, running frantically from a pack of mutated monsters. Yuzu realizes the monsters were lured by the scent of his evolution and prepares to intervene. Xiaohong leaps forward, her flaming fur illuminating the terrified faces of the girls as she strikes down the nearest beast. Yuzu's roots surge forward, effortlessly crushing a mutated hippo that tried to charge the sisters. He methodically eliminates the surrounding threats, accumulating thousands of points in a matter of seconds. The sisters stare in awe and terror at the glowing tree, and Yuzu realizes he cannot let them leave with his secret. Using a root, he carefully writes a message in the dirt to convince them he is the reincarnation of their father. The girls recognize the handwriting and secret names, falling to their knees in tears of joy and grief. Yuzu gifts them each a hairpin crafted from his own spiritual branches to provide them protection. He then instructs Xiaohong to escort them safely back to their village before the thick fog completely hides the canyon. Alone once more, Yuzu begins his second round of enhancements, pouring energy into his new barrier abilities. The fog thickens until visibility is less than 4 meters, turning the mountain into a literal land of fog. Days later, the Warak snake's eye opens in a dark cliffside cave, its wounds healed and its hunger returning. Unaware of the lurking threat, the sisters return to the canyon, bringing fertilizer they believe will help their father grow. Suddenly, the sky darkens as the Warak snake descends from the cliffs, its metallic head aimed directly at the girls. Before they can react, the serpent's tail lashes out, creating a shockwave that throws the sisters into the rocks. Yuzu senses the disaster through his root network and sends his vines screaming across the terrain. He arrives too late to see the snake fleeing with Xiaoqing's bloodied, motionless body in its tail. Yuzu catches her body as it is tossed away, desperately infusing her with every drop of life essence he possesses. Despite his efforts, the system repeatedly confirms that her vital signals have vanished completely. A blood-red aura begins to emanate from Yuzu's leaves as his grief transforms into an unstoppable tide of rage. The canyon walls shake as his roots burrow deep into the earth, sensing the snake's path for the final hunt. He summons his beasts with a mental command that vibrates with pure malice, ordering them to prepare for an all-out war. But as he prepares to strike, a strange golden light begins to descend from the clouds above the girl's body. The light forms a flickering humanoid shape, but it is not quite human, and it seems to be looking for a vessel to inhabit. Far away, the Warak snake pauses, sensing a power even greater than the tree's rage beginning to stir in its old territory. The silence in the canyon felt heavy as the remains of the Warak snake began to dissolve into pure spiritual essence. Yuzu felt the surge of evolution points coursing through his roots like a river of molten gold. He knew that the sound of his battle would soon draw unwanted attention from the human cities beyond the mountains. To survive, he needed more than just strength. He needed a sanctuary hidden from the eyes of satellite technology. Yuzu accessed the system interface and selected the ability to manipulate environmental moisture and spiritual energy. Suddenly, thick white vapors began to pour from the pores of his long, translucent leaves. The fog spread rapidly, clinging to the jagged rocks and filling every crevice of the canyon floor. Within minutes, the entire territory was swallowed by a dense, impenetrable white shroud. This was no ordinary weather phenomenon, but a spiritual barrier that scrambled electronic signals. Satisfied with his new land of fog, Yuzu turned his attention to a more delicate task. He looked at the flickering light that remained of Xiaoqing, the human girl who had died protecting his peace. Using the system's life attribute energy, he began to weave a new vessel for her consciousness. The process was taxing, requiring a precise balance of spiritual pressure to keep the soul from shattering. Roots rose from the earth like weaving needles, knitting together a body made of refined plant essence. Slowly, the form of a young woman took shape, her skin as pale and smooth as white wood. When her eyes finally opened, they shimmered with the same emerald green as Yuzu's own leaves. Xiaoqing stood up, looking at her hands, which were now capable of channeling the tree's power. Yuzu communicated through their spiritual bond, explaining her new role as his envoy to the human world. She bowed deeply, her heart now beat in sync with the rhythm of the great willow. Meanwhile, at a nearby military outpost, a group of soldiers stared at their blank radar screens. The commanding officer slammed his fist on the table, demanding to know why the canyon had vanished from sight. They had detected a massive energy spike moments before the signal was lost. A reconnaissance team was ordered to investigate the perimeter of the mysterious fog. As they approached the white wall, the air grew unnaturally cold and thick. Their compasses spun wildly, and their radios emitted nothing but high-pitched screeches. From high above in the canopy, Yuziu watched the tiny metal insects crawl toward his border. He didn't want to kill them yet, so he commanded the fog to distort their sense of direction. The soldiers drove for hours, only to find themselves back at the very entrance they had started from. Fear began to spread among the ranks as stories of the Canyon of No Return began to circulate. Yuziu knew the military wouldn't give up so easily and prepared his next move. He sent Xiaoqing into the city, disguised as a normal survivor, to gather intelligence. She moved with a grace that was slightly too perfect, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Through her, Yuziu learned of a specialized task force being formed to hunt super mutants. He began to accelerate the evolution of his beast companions to prepare for the inevitable clash. The panda's fur turned into iron-like bristles, while the fox grew a 10th tail of pure energy. His territory was no longer just a forest, but a fortress of evolved life. But deep within the mountains, a new signature of spiritual energy was waking up. It was an ancient creature that had been dormant for centuries, disturbed by Yuziu's rapid growth. Yuziu felt a tremor through his roots that didn't come from the wind or the humans. A massive shadow began to loom over the edge of the canyon, blocking out the stars. As the earthstone elephant turtle let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the land of fog, Yuziu realized his hidden sanctuary had just become a target for a titan. The massive earthstone elephant turtle lunged forward, its footsteps cracking the bedrock of the misty canyon. Yuziu lashed out with hundreds of glowing white willow branches, wrapping them tightly around the beast's rocky limbs. The turtle let out a low-frequency rumble that shattered the nearby cliffs into a million shards of debris. Every fiber of Yuziu's wooden body groaned under the immense pressure of the titan's weight. He channeled his accumulated evolution points into a concentrated burst of life energy at his roots. Giant wooden spikes erupted from the earth, piercing through the soft underbelly of the stone-armored intruder. As the earthstone elephant turtle collapsed, its life essence flowed back into the soil, feeding Yuziu's growth. However, the victory was short-lived as a secondary tremor shook the world, far more violent than the first. From the depths of the ocean emerged Austral, a creature of pure destruction that defied all logic. Austral's presence alone caused the spiritual energy in the air to boil and combust spontaneously. Yuziu extended his fog domain to its absolute limit, trying to mask the location of his spirit beasts. The beast Austral sensed the concentration of power and turned its many-eyed gaze toward the canyon. The nine-tailed fox and the giant panda stood at the edge of the fog, baring their fangs at the approaching nightmare. Yuziu signaled his disciples to retreat, knowing this was a battle only he could potentially survive. Austral fired a beam of pure kinetic energy that vaporized a mountain peak in an instant. Yuziu counterattacked by weaving his spiritual branches into a massive, protective lattice. The heat from Austral's breath began to singe the leaves of the sacred willow tree. He realized that traditional physical attacks were useless against a creature that could regenerate from atoms. Yuziu decided to utilize the soul manipulation techniques he had perfected through Xiaoqing. He projected his consciousness directly into the chaotic mind of the destructive beast. Inside Austral's mind, Yuziu saw only a bottomless void of hunger and ancient sorrow. The human military, watching the Titans clash from afar, decided to execute their final protocol. A high-ranking officer pressed a sequence of keys, authorizing the launch of a tactical nuclear warhead. Far away in a hidden silo, a missile carrying the end of days ignited its engines. Yuziu's roots, spread thin across the continent, felt the vibration of the missile's launch. He knew that even his evolved form might not survive a direct hit from such a weapon. With seconds to spare, Yuziu diverted every ounce of spiritual energy into a spatial warping barrier. The nuclear missile entered the atmosphere above the canyon, trailing a line of white smoke. There was no sound at first, only a light more intense than 1,000 suns blooming in the sky. The shock wave arrived next, turning the forest into toothpicks and vaporizing the river. Yuziu stood at the epicenter, his spatial barrier flickering as it absorbed the brunt of the radiation. He felt his consciousness fragmenting as the system screamed warnings about critical structural failure. Austral, caught in the blast without a barrier, was torn apart, its black flesh scattered to the winds. As the mushroom cloud rose into the stratosphere, a deathly silence fell over the wasteland. Yuziu was nothing but a blackened stump, his vibrant white leaves gone and his spirit dimmed. Deep within the charred wood, a single pulse of golden light remained, clinging to existence. He realized that the humans would never stop until every mutated being was extinct. Satellite imagery from the human military confirmed the total destruction of the target zone. But they did not see the tiny white roots beginning to sprout from the radioactive ash. As Yuzu began his forced rebirth, a new presence far darker than Austral stirred in the northern shadows. In the pitch-black void of the settlement interface, the system's voice echoed with a chilling finality. The system revealed that while Yuzu had died as a human, his existence as the willow tree was far from over. It warned of an impending darkness scarier than any human threat, requiring Yuzu to become a god to survive. Accepting the system's unconditional help, Yuzu felt his core being reconstructed with immense spiritual energy. Back in reality, Xiaoqing held the pulsing core near the stump of the destroyed sacred tree. As the core merged with the trunk, a violent surge of life energy caused the willow's branches to regrow instantly. A single strike from a willow leaf knife shattered the space above, completely destroying a human surveillance satellite. One by one, the fallen beast companions opened their eyes, fully revived and stronger than ever before. Yuzu announced their victory, but admitted his mistake in remaining neutral, vowing to make humans fear their territory. He ordered his beasts to search the mountain ranges and eliminate any exotic creatures that refused to submit. Ranking his mutated roots at the peak of rank 1, Yuzu tested his new energy-absorbing ability on his sleeping subordinates. Xiaoqing returned to the human side to investigate the reincarnation of ancient Taoist sword cultivators like General Li. Yuzu welcomed a new second-order ally, the Panda Alcohol Immortal, who offered a cave full of fire spirit stones. To celebrate, the Golden Monkey brought barrels of wine, and Yuzu officially named the panda his 9th ferocious beast. As the second wave of spiritual energy tide arrived, the world was engulfed in a colorful, reality-shaking glow. Yuzu absorbed the massive influx of energy, his spiritual power skyrocketing past 1.8 million. Human leaders watched in horror as the demon tree they thought destroyed appeared even larger and more dangerous. When a second nuclear missile was launched, Yuzu used his level 3 crystallization to shield himself from the heat. Emerging from the dust unscathed, our hero shook the earth with such force that cracks appeared in human city walls. He led his army to Maple City, surrounding it with his roots and taking the entire population hostage. Yuzu demanded the Federation hand over the mastermind of the nuclear strike, or the city would vanish. Meanwhile, news arrived of a terrifying fourth-order beast named Austral rampaging through Australia. Live footage showed the panda Cheesy fighting Austral desperately to protect his childhood friend, Xiaoyi. Seeing his comrade in danger, Yuzu moved his entire army across the continent to Jir City. Our hero's roots burst through the shelter floor, surprising the refugees and protecting them from Austral's minions. Yuzu stood face to face with Austral, the spiritual pressure between them creating a magnitude 7.0 earthquake. Austral revealed it had swallowed Cheesy alive to use him as bait to lure the divine tree. Enraged, Yuzu transformed into his giant humanoid combat stance and incinerated Austral's entire nest of eggs. The two titans clashed, their blows shattering mountains and sending shockwaves across the ocean. Austral unleashed its hidden strength, nearly depleting Yuzu's spiritual energy with a series of devastating beams. In a shocking move, Yuzu reached out to the human prime minister and offered to merge with their spiritual missile. Roaring in pain, our boy absorbed the missile's energy, transforming into a form pulsing with 13 million spiritual power. With a final use of temporal paws and arboreal roots, Yuzu pierced through Austral's heart, ending the 2-month battle. Cheesy was rescued from the monster's belly and reunited with a tearful Xiaoyi, promising never to run away again. After the battle, Yuzu retreated back to the Misty Mountains, feeling a strange sense of emptiness despite his victory. He bestowed the Ice Spirit Flower upon the White Snake, evolving her into the legendary Aqua Dragoness. But the peace was short-lived as the 7 kings of the deep sea launched a global invasion against all continents. Xiaoqing and a white jade elephant fought to protect the city, but were nearly crushed by the combined power of 2 sea kings. Just as they fell, Yuzu's roots caught them, revealing that he had finally completed his breakthrough to the Fourth Order. Now the true guardian of Earth, Yuzu stood ready to lead his army of beasts and humans to face the ultimate darkness.